A brand new patch for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak has just dropped, and this not only adds quality of life features but also makes changes to the endgame and features quite a variety of weapon balancing. So let's take a look at this and see what was buffed and also what was nerfed. I've only taken a glimpse at this and there's plenty of good stuff to talk about, so let's dive right into it. So under new story elements, of course, a new monster has been added, new afflicted monsters and new risen elder dragons have been added to the game. This will only be available on November 24th, but of course it's already part of the patch. New quests have been added, the cap for anomaly research level has been raised, and the same goes for anomaly investigations, which will now feature a wider variety of monsters so that you can more easily get the monster that gives you the most XP. And there's also a level adjustment feature that has been added to anomaly investigations, which will make it easier for everyone to level them up. Of course, as with all title updates and all new patches, the level cap for armor upgrades has been raised, and this introduces new weapons, armor, layered equipment, and skills, which I'm very curious to see what they are on November 24th. Curious weapon crafting now includes an option for upgrading unlanced shelling levels, which is something that we've talked about before in a previous video. I'm sure gunlance users are all very excited about this. There's even more stuff coming to curio armor crafting, such as new skills being added to the pool of potential skills, as well as having 2 armor augment types that have been added to the curio crafting armor set. One thing that I, myself and many other players were very excited about is that now you can bring your followers with you on more types of quests. And it seems like you'll even have the option of customizing their wyvern riding and their item usage, which is pretty interesting. I definitely did not see that coming and I don't think they had advertised that part of it. As most of you know, the most popular mod that is available for Sunbreak is one that lets you bring followers with you on all types of quests. So I'm sure that Capcom and the Monster Hunter team has listened to all the feedback and, well, they gave us what we wanted. Now moving on to balance adjustments, and this is what I was most interested in. For the greatsword there's a little bit of a nerf, but it is pretty minor and it is essentially a bug fist where you would use a large barrel bomb to counter and go into a true charge slash, but the bomb would be dealing extra damage, which was not intended. So now the bomb will be dealing default damage, which again is a minor nerf, pretty insignificant, but hey, the developers are at least pointing that out. Now for the sword and shield, the destroyer oil will now also restore some sharpness. I've been playing a lot of Generations Ultimate, and that is one of the coolest things about using oils, is that in combination with Chaos Oil you can replenish some of your sharpness. In Sunbreak, Destroyer Oil is essentially not used by a lot of people. It feels like a waste of a slot. I'm curious to see how much sharpness you regain by using it, and hopefully it will be useful to actually bring Destroyer Oil with you on your hunts. They also fixed an apparent issue with the timing regarding chaining Rising Slash into a round slash, which would mistakenly chain into lateral slash or shield attack. So I guess the sword and shield combos will now be a lot more consistent. As for the dual blades, Spiral Slash has been buffed. Attack power is slightly increased, which I believe translates to its raw damage being increased, and elemental scale slightly increased as well. I like that it's getting a buff, but at the same time I feel like it's a bit misplaced. Currently the playstyle of dual blades is to use aerial dual blades and deal as much damage as you can until you have your wire bugs and can use Spiral Slash, and then you go back to doing aerial dual blades combos. Most of your damage comes from Spiral Slash, and as it currently is, the dual blades playstyle can be a bit monotonous if you're just trying to optimize your damage. So buffing Spiral Slash is going to emphasize that even more. I feel like they should have buffed instead the different combos of the weapon. But it is a buff regardless, one that I will enjoy as someone that loves to use that weapon. They've also fixed a couple of bugs related to the dual blades, but they're very insignificant. They've also fixed the skill Intrepid Heart, where it would not properly trigger for the dual blades or for the hammer whenever they use their invulnerability animations. Personally, I don't use Intrepid Heart in any of my builds, but in case you were using, hey, now it's more viable. Now for the hammer, Dash Breaker, attack power has been slightly increased, also performing a charge right before the Dash Breaker ends will start you at max charge instead of continuing from your previous charge level. Additionally, the Silkbind Spinning Bludgeon's attack power has been increased, and its elemental scaling has been slightly increased. And let me tell you, these are some pretty hefty buffs for the hammer, and I feel like they may make the strength style of the weapon a lot more powerful. The fact that you can go to max charge right after using Dash Breaker instead of just continuing with the previous charge level is fantastic in my opinion, and it will make the damage of the hammer a lot more consistent. Or at the very least, you'll be able to increase your uptime with this weapon. I've not used the hammer a lot in Sunbreak because I'm still not too used to the playstyle in this game, and also because I feel like it is somewhat underpowered compared to what it was in the past. But with this buff, I might go back and use the weapon because I used to love it so much in Iceborne. Now as for the hunting horn, my dear baby, the sharpness extension melody effect now also restores some sharpness upon activation. Okay, that is an interesting buff. I don't think I use any hunting horn that has this melody, so it's not going to affect me in any way, but okay then. Now look at all of this text regarding the Gunlance. It seems like Capcom has finally seen that Gunlance users have been asking for buffs for a very long time. Let's see. Firstly, we have Ground Splitter. The effect duration has been increased, that's nice, and Wirebug gauge recovery speed has been increased. So I imagine the recovery speed of this skill now is small? I think that's what they mean to say there. A Hail Cutter, Wirebug gauge cost changed to 1, oh that is huge actually. Wirebug gauge recovery speed changed to medium as well. These are all fantastic buffs, they allow you to have more uptime with the weapon, because more often than not, if you don't have the buffs up, you're not dealing as much damage as you should be doing with the Gunlance, which is a weapon that already by itself doesn't deal a lot of damage, so this will all make the weapon a lot more consistent. Fixed an inconsistency between the player animation and the duration of blowback and negation, and damage reduction effects that would occur after successfully hitting a monster with Ground Splitter. Okay, I guess the invisibility frames are now going to be more accurate, that's nice. And fixed an issue where the forward movement of Bullet Barrage would cause large barrel bombs and mega barrel bombs to explode at unintended times. I've definitely never seen that happen, but that sounds hilarious. Fixed an issue with the timing of chaining a lunging up thrust into a quick reload, and finally an overhead smash, where using the button assigned for an overhead smash would mistakenly chain into a shelling instead. I think I've had this bug happen a couple of times where I feel like I've input the correct button presses but it ends up doing a different action and I end up going into a regular shelling. So I think that's what this means, and if that's the case, all the better. It's not as many buffs as I expected for the Gunlance overall, but considering that with this patch you'll be able to increase the shelling level of every single Gunlance in the entire game all the way to level 8, I feel like this is going to put the Gunlance in a really good spot, and Gunlance users are really going to enjoy this update. Shout out to Rurikon, I can't wait to see how he plays this patch and how happy he is about all of this. And now on to the Insect Glaive. I'm kind of curious, I don't really see people talking about this weapon in Sunbreak a whole lot. People were using it a lot in the demo to abuse the Gather Kinsect mechanic, but ever since Sunbreak released and people stopped playing the demo, I rarely see people talking about this weapon. Awakened Kinsect Attack. Adjusted the attack power values for each number of extract colors consumed as below. So for 1 extract color and 2 extract colors, the attack power is slightly increased, and with 3 extract colors, it is increased. This is one of those things where I wish Capcom would list the actual numbers or the actual damage percent ratios of how much damage it does actually increase, because honestly this doesn't really tell me much other than that Awakened Kinsect Attack might actually be worth it to use it this time around. It never felt all that good to use in my opinion in Sunbreak, especially since sometimes you could miss the attack and it would feel awful, and even when you landed the attack it didn't really deal all that much damage, so it was definitely in need of a buff. I just don't know if this buff is going to be enough, but a buff is a buff and Insect Glaive users are going to be happy about this one. Now we are moving on to the bowguns. Starting with the heavy bowgun, crouching shot has been adjusted as follows. The recovery speed of the overheat gauge has been increased and overheat duration has been decreased. And for all of these different ammo types, the interval between rapid fire shots has been decreased. So these are pretty consistent buffs overall. I'm not sure how good crouching shot is. Personally, I haven't messed around with bowguns a whole lot in Sunbreak. From watching speedruns, I don't feel like they needed that much of a buff, but maybe it's just that crouching shot wasn't as powerful of a hunter art as the other ones are, so they are just buffing this one so it goes up to the same level as the other ones. If you are a bowgun user, let me know in the comment section below how good crouching shot is or how impactful this buff may actually be. Again, they're not being very specific about by how much the overheat duration has been decreased or by how much the recovery speed of the overheat gauge has been increased, which would be helpful to know the actual numbers, but I'm sure some heavy bowgun mains will get their hands on the weapons and see just how big of a difference that is. There's also a bug fix regarding the heavy bowgun. Fixed an issue where the skill Intrepid Heart would unintentionally activate after a counter is successfully triggered when taking a hit during the crouching portions of counter charger or counter shot. So I guess you would just end up wasting Intrepid Heart whenever you would use those hunter arts, which would render the skill entirely useless since the point of it is that you can take a hit for free without taking damage or being staggered. There's also a few other bug fixes regarding weapon sound effects not playing correctly, the skill redirection prompting a long chat message, and a few other things, but personally I've never been affected by any of this and likely you have not been affected by this as well, or at least I don't believe so since these seem to be quite rare to trigger. But there seems like there are a few more buffs, this time we're talking about the Palicos and Palamutes. Actually, it looks like it's just for the Palamutes. Some Palamute gear have had their values adjusted. The cooldown time for each tool has also been slightly increased, which makes sense because Palamutes were quite overpowered to be honest, but there's also some buffs here, so let's see. The dual-bladed chain, the elemental scaling has been increased and attack power increased. Guarding Parasol, stun value slightly increased and exhaust value slightly increased. Steel Fang and Stout Score Fang, attack power increased. Large Shuriken, elemental scaling slightly increased and status effect scaling slightly decreased. Okay, so I guess you don't get to proc that as often. Palamute Silkbinder elemental scaling increased and attack power slightly increased. However, the status effect scaling has been slightly decreased. So a bit of a nerf when it comes to status effects, but a big buff across the board when it comes to damage. Which is a bit weird considering that Palamutes just deal a ton of damage. Especially if you go with an all-out ranged Palamute with Palamute Silkbinder, which has now been buffed when it comes to elemental scaling and attack power. So I really don't know why they're buffing all of this. I genuinely don't get why Palamutes are being buffed, I feel like they're insanely strong. I can understand buffing the melee attacks for the Palamutes because they were not as strong as the ranged ones, but again, even the ranged attacks have been buffed. All I can say is, I can't wait to see just how much damage my Palamutes do whenever I go on my hunts. There's also a bunch of bug fixes related to Palamutes, but I feel like we don't need to go over all of them. Apparently followers have also been buffed, which I guess will make them a lot more reliable, especially now that we're going to be able to take them on all kinds of hunts and not just the special investigations that we've been only able to take them in. So the followers' attack power with the following weapon types has been increased. We have the Great Sword, Longsword, Sword and Shield, Dual Blades, Lance, Gun Lance, Switch Axe, Charge Blade, Insect Glaive, Light Bowgun, Heavy Bowgun, and Bow. So if I'm correct, that is every single weapon in the game except for the hammer and the hunting horn? Huh. I do get why the hunting horn is not being buffed because I assume that Minoto or Inoue are always chosen, or they're probably the most chosen followers because they're the ones that can use hunting horn to buff yourself and the rest of the party. But I didn't know that the hammer was all that powerful for followers. That's quite interesting actually. But hey, they're making the followers more powerful, so I guess you can take them on the anomaly quests and they'll actually do decent damage and will reduce your hunt times on the insane grind that is the anomaly investigations, especially if you're someone that hasn't leveled them up and is still catching up on the grind. And that is pretty much it for what we're getting with this new patch. It may not be much on text, but I feel like this is going to change how many weapons are played, especially the hammer and of course the gun lance. I'm very excited about those two weapons. I'll be sure to try them out and see how good they are in this new patch. Of course we're getting Chaotic Gormagala, Risen Teostra and Risen Kushala Dora, and I cannot wait to hunt them, see how good their armor sets are, and see how good the Chaotic Gormagala weapons are going to be. Man, I just cannot wait for this update. Tell me how much you guys are excited for this update in the comment section below, and with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting.